ask anybody's question but yours. You're an idiot. And really a disloyal person.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Disloyal Idiots podcast here on the Fans First Sports Network. Christian Guzman here alongside Andy Pregler, sans Steve Haller, who is in much more tropical conditions than either of the two of us right now. We hope to see him back very, very shortly.
I'm happy Steve is enjoying himself wherever he is. I am enjoying myself doing things that are not tropical. Playing a college football video game, getting really into college football. It's going to be a great time.
I mean, you and I have both shared the same vision of looking to go to the maximum 30 years in a dynasty with whatever school we so choose to do with. And I love that we're both on that track because we just want to be like absolute program builders and busters right now.
I honestly, I started getting really into EA college football as like Ultimate Team, and I still promise I'm gonna play Tim Lyons. What's up, Tim? In Ultimate Team, but the Dynasty mode has taken over my life mostly because the recruiting mini game is so good, and
it's the best. It's the best part of Dynasty. Recruiting is so much fun.
It is a very fulfilling and rewarding experience. And it's also very funny because this is where I wish Steve was here. The number of elite recruits, and I mean 3-star and above recruits coming out of the Rochester, Syracuse area. I know that EA doesn't have the ability to like weight different areas like appropriately. They're just going with like, look, we're gonna load in like 5 cities in central New York and call it a day. But man, I'm loving the fact that Rochester and Syracuse are churning out 3 and 4 stars at the rate that they are.
My very first the dynasty that I'm running right now, I only got 1 5-star recruit my first year, which is cool. I managed to get a 5-star recruit my very first year. In the dynasty mode as Syracuse, which is very, very hard to do. That 5-star recruit was the number 3 recruit in the nation. He was a running back, and he was from Rochester. And he ended up being a 99 overall and was taken out in the first round as a junior. He was incredible. I loved playing with him for the small amount of time I did.
But I mean, this is the fun part of the game. Like, I feel like part of that is weighted and they understand how this works. Mm-hmm. But I think, honestly,
one of the other fun parts about like something we love about college athletics is like opposed to like, pro sports dynasties, it's the forced turnover is really, really fun because you have to constantly keep on recruiting and keep on replenishing your roster, which is kind of like one of the appeals of dynasty mode, unlike other pro sports where it can sometimes be really, really easy to, once you build up a team, it's really easy to just dominate because, pro careers can last 10, 15 years for blue chip players. And like for this, like you've got maybe 3 years with a player if he's really, really good.
Oh, it is amazing. I in my dynasty my first dynasty run that I have right now with Syracuse, I have the quarterback that I recruited who was a 3-star like diamond in the rough guy that I found from Elmira, Ohio. Love that. Scrambling quarterback. I started him over Carson Del Rio Wilson in 2025. And and again, as a junior, he led Syracuse to the national title in 2027. And I convinced him to return for his senior year because he is a scrambler and not a thrower. And so he was like projected for like a 4th round NFL draft pick. And I'm like, come back to school, buddy. Let's get you another chip. Let's get you up into the 2nd round here. Come on, bud. This game is addicting. It is causing problems. I do not care. I have, like, Christian, how not to play the Andy is old game, but like you were a kid when this game came out last time.
I didn't have NCAA 14. The only NCAA football game I had, and this is lodged in my memory because I did spend an aggressive amount of hours on it, not knowing what NCAA football was and what college football was. Um, the biggest thing that I had was on the Wii NCAA football '09, which was really, really fun. It was on the Wii because my family was a Nintendo household. I didn't grow up to PlayStation until much later in my life. Um, but like, yeah, even since then, like, I only really got into sports building dynasties once I got into college. When I was, playing around with MLB The Show, which was my gateway drug into dynasty building for sports games. It was like MLB The Show 16 was like my first gateway
Yeah.
drug to like dynasty building for like again for sports. So this is my first time doing it for college football, and boy, has this been addicting. Again, like you said, Andy, it's hard for this to not be addicting, and I've loved every minute of it right now. I am again, like I told Andy, I'm doing the serotonin dynasty right now with Syracuse. I just want to feel good, so it's on freshmen. I can freely admit that and not feel guilty about it because I just want to feel good, and then I'll worry about getting better at the game later. But it's it's just so much fun to be playing as Syracuse in this awesome world we live in.
Yeah, it's definitely very fun. And the weird part about this week is that I have lived in this little bubble where the only thing that is happening is EA college football. That's the only thing. And then all of a sudden this week it was like, hey, here are all the media days. Here's ACC Media Day. Here's actual Syracuse college news. Oh, by the way, they opened camp on Monday.
Yeah. But
I'm sorry, what?
Also in our personal bubble, were you awake at 11 o'clock last night?
Oh, that was I was at a party for the Olympics. Shout out Miles Robinson and the other Syracuse Olympians. But that was happening.
But you did see that news as well, I'm assuming, and consumed that news greatly from of the non-Syracuse related news in our nerd bubble.
Oh, yeah. That was I interrupted again, shout out to anybody actually listening to Syracuse football news. You have to sit through at least 10 minutes of dribble. I have many thoughts on this. This is when I wish Steve was here so he could plug his other podcast where they will probably talk about this. I think it's a bad idea. I will enjoy the hell out of it, but I think it's a remarkably bad idea.
Yes, I agree.
Not listening,
I agree there are probably many pitfalls, but this is going to be really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, for the non-Mike Helds who are listening to this podcast, Robert Downey Jr. is returning to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, not as Iron Man, but as Doctor Doom, arguably the most iconic villain in the entire Marvel universe. So how is this going to work in a way that doesn't confuse fans? I don't know. How is this going to work in a way that appeases hardcore fans who can kill a movie in 1,000 Reddit comments? I have no idea. But what I do know is that there is this, and this is a very long segue, Christian. So just give me some breath here. Give me some room to cook. There is a desire in this world to return to a level of nostalgia that I do not think is sustainable, where everybody wants it to be like it was when they remember the best years. I think there is an element of Fran Brown's program and recruiting building strategy that relies on this to a potentially disastrous degree. However, from what I have seen so far, Fran is not solely relying on nostalgia. Fran is leveraging nostalgia to get what he needs. And I think that is the difference between the Syracuse Orange program and the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now, where Marvel is relying on nostalgia to get what it needs. Fran is simply leveraging that story about going to MetLife in the 90s or in the 2000s and is leveraging the old adage of Syracuse football to get the buy-in that he needs to run a more modern program. And what I mean by this is that the new roster drop. We'll talk about the new roster in a second. I just want to talk about the weights for a second, man. Christian and I are about to talk about some offensive scheme stuff in a minute, but this fundamentally, this is a different team because the average weight of the guys in the trenches went up by a not insignificant factor in one offseason. And that is not something that just happens. That is infrastructure, that is nutritionists, that's dietitians, that is the entire ecosystem around Syracuse football fundamentally changing in a short period of time. And that is actually the thing that I'm most excited about with this new football season, because this is the first proof of concept that we have that things are fundamentally changing in the background.
Yeah, give me a second as my computer always does this. It takes a bit of time to actually pull up the share screen. I'll actually pull up the
me and Juice.com. I understand.
Yeah, it's and Andy understands this. This will take a bit of time for my computer to adjust, but it was really, really fun to see Steve break this down a bit earlier this week about the drastic shifts in weight that we saw from a lot of people, just in general across the team. I've got the roster pulled up right now. We can go through a couple of these as Andy sees fit. Again, if you're not watching on the live stream, on Twitch and YouTube, Disloyal Idiots, please tune in. It's always a lot of fun. And also on the Fans First Sports Network Twitter page, please tune in as well. This is the full updated roster. It's got all of the new freshmen as well who weren't a part of the team, who didn't join in the summer. Joined in the fall, I should say. And boy, it's been really, really fun to see again. Just it continues, and kind of like what Andy has been saying as well. It's been fun to see that Fran is not just using nostalgia to sell the team. It's kind of like the Fran's nostalgia of like the 90s and his story at MetLife is kind of like the seasoning that NBC uses for an America's Got Talent contestant, but the actual like talent and recruiting pitch is what you see in front of the judges, and that's kind of what we're seeing here from Fran, is that the background story is nice, but at least he's putting his mouth where it is and getting people to buy into the program through recruits, through NIL and other things like that, and also as we'll go through the weight room.
Yeah, I think there's some not great stories to take from the roster drop. I think that there's one that we need to talk about very quickly, and it is not my favorite. This is the fact. Yeah, you know where I'm going here with this.
Mm-hmm.
Caden Bailey is no longer on the roster. Bailey was expected to be a rather significant contributor to this team this year. He is not on the roster, and while I think we all had an initial, this might not be a good thing, it turns out that Bailey cannot, according to Fran Brown himself, Bailey cannot get medically cleared to play, but instead of being forced out via transfer, Fran and Syracuse team are allowing Bailey to go through his rehab process at Syracuse on scholarship until he is able to get medically cleared to play elsewhere. This is an unfortunate reality of college football, where the higher up you are, the harder it is to get medically cleared with certain types of injuries. I'm not going to speculate on whether it's head or whether it's any other part of the body injury. We've seen players at Syracuse have trouble getting medically requalified and then get qualified elsewhere. Again, it's really sad for Bailey, my takeaway as Christian readjusts and deals with something here, my takeaway here is that Bailey and the situation is something that's going to happen more in college football, and this is something that turns Fran Brown from a player's coach in the media eyes into a player's coach in the player's eyes. And what I mean by this is that there are tons of things that happen behind the scenes that we don't see that involve player injuries, player discipline, player long-term health and career that involve very difficult decisions to be made at the administrative level. And Fran is clearly showing both to Caden Bailey, to his current team, and to future recruits that Syracuse is a place that you can come to and be taken care of long term. Syracuse is a place that values these players in a way where they are not strictly commodities. And I'm not saying that that's not going to change. I'm not saying that that's like I'm not trying to like paint Fran Brown as a saint here. I'm simply saying that in past years, we have seen other Syracuse coaches look at this situation and say, you know what? It's easier to just get this player out of Syracuse. It's easier to get this player out of the team and not have this hanging around the roster, not hanging around the situation, because this is a player who cannot contribute to my team in any real way. And Fran is essentially saying that's not going to be what happens here. And I really appreciate Fran for that, because that is not something that he had to do. That's something that he chooses to do. And I give him a ton of respect for that. So that is the not fun part of the roster reveal. The fun part of the roster reveal, as I share my screen here on the Twitch stream, for sharing Michael Ostrowski's Nudes Magician article about the updated roster, is that we see some new numbers on the roster. So, if you are somebody who, recognizes players by numbers, here's the new numbers. But Steve Haller, as he is enjoying his vacation, created a spreadsheet comparing weights from 2023 to 2024. Christian, I am right now sharing the guys who have had the largest weight loss. Think it's interesting here. Don't necessarily think that there's a ton to take away, except, man, Josh Iowa was carrying a lot of weight. Same thing for Sandro Moyello. Those boys were big.
Yeah. And it's good to see, I think, with just how modern football is nowadays as well. You can't have your offensive linemen too big. Obviously, you need them to be a decent size, obviously, but especially with how modern football is, with a general trend that most people like to, push tempo and things like that, I think it's a better idea for at least some of these guys to shed just a little bit of weight.
Yeah. And on the other side of this is where I get more excited. These are our biggest weight gainers.
Yeah.
Cody Hornsby, dude, what the heck have you been doing?
Yeah, I think is projected to be more of a I think he's projected to be the third center behind behind John Ray Reed and Aloha. But boy, that's a huge gain. I think the big ones we see are some of the guys down the chart as well. A big one, Devin Grant putting on at least 9 pounds is big, since he'll be the starting quarter, and you don't want to see him shoved around too much as we get towards the better parts of the ACC schedule.
Yeah, let's talk about I made this joke with Steve multiple times last week, but let's talk about the Aronde of it all. Aronde Gadsden.
That too.
Who is now listed at 236, who, again, is coming off Les Frank surgery on his foot, is expected to be a full participant in camp when it opens. This is an insane weight gain for a guy who has apparently been on limited cardio, limited weight.
Yeah.
Like my takeaway from this is that Aronde has been hitting that bench in an aggressive manner. But I'm kind of here for that.
Yeah. Gadsden went up from 223 to 236. That's a 13-pound increase. And you'd have to assume that a good percentage of that is muscle. And for those of you who, like Andy and I, who have played the college football game a lot, know Gadsden is essentially a cheat code for the Syracuse offense. He is so good in the college football game. You can only imagine how good he'll once again be once he gets back on the field for the Orange.
Yeah, again, we're going to talk about Syracuse's media day in a few minutes here. But I talked about this on the other Fans First Sports Network show that I do, Level Up. I think Aronde Gadsden is going to be one of the biggest bounce back candidates this season, not just because I'm biased and I like Syracuse a lot. He is the next Kittle, Kelsey, Mark Andrews, Laporta type tight end that is coming out of college right now, where he's really an oversized slot receiver. But that weight gain is really important because in order to create that differentiation and that space that you need, you either do it through shiftiness or you do it through size. And I'm not saying that Gadsden doesn't have the moves. I'm just saying that as a tight end, you're going to be expected to have a certain level of size. And Tim is actually asking a really great question here does he healthy? This is my biggest question going into camp next week. This is an aggressive rehab timeline coming from his first and really his only major injury that he's had in his college career so far. And again, this is a freak injury of the foot. This is not this is not anything that you can project forward. This is something that you can say that if he doesn't handle it correctly will lead to more issues moving forward. And he's already moving on a pretty aggressive timeline. So Christian, I think you and I both share the same concern here. This is a really talented receiving core that Syracuse has that is remarkably unproven outside of Aronde. And Trevor Pena is the guy who's another, like, hey, we'd like you to stay healthy and you're proven, but it's been a minute since you've been on the field. Gadsden is somebody who I think if he has truly handled this recovery well, will play all 12 games and 1,000 yards receiving, 10 touchdowns are almost a guarantee for this guy, which is insane to say. But that's where his ceiling, that's where his talent ceiling is.
This is where I think it's good that we can pull up also EA college football ratings as well as a part of this. If you're watching on the stream, I've pulled up right now the current EA college football ratings for Syracuse's roster right now, and I'm on the wide receiver screen. And as you can see, your highest rated wide receiver is Trevor Pena, who right now in the current position on the depth chart, quote unquote, is an 80, but really he's only a 77 overall. Justice Ross Simmons, the Colorado State transfer, is a 79 overall, the highest rated wide receiver. When you look at this receiving core, there's their talent, yes, but it's largely unproven, which is why you see a lot of these lower ratings from EA right now in this wide receiver room. But then when you switch it over to the tight end, Gadsden jumps out as that 91 overall rated, which is why one of the reasons why he's so good in this game, but also just shows you the talent gap that not only is perceived, but I think a lot of people think is also correct in terms of the receiver core that Kyle McCord is eventually going to have to throw at in the near future. So that's why Gadsden's health is such a big concern, because when you go back again to that wide receiver room, there's just not a lot of proven talent there, at least at the levels you would expect them to be at in order to produce to the levels that Syracuse aspires to be, especially with a coach like Fran Brown who has some pretty lofty goals right now. So that is the big reason why Gadsden's health is paramount to the Syracuse team. And we even saw it during spring practice. He was practicing for the first couple of sessions and was moving a bit slower than I think you would expect him to. But that's, again, he was still recovering from that Lisfranc. I think it was even a miracle that he was even out there to begin with, much so in a jersey that wasn't a non-contact jersey, if I recall correctly. So it's important to see that he was already making those first steps, but we'll have to see how the timeline from March, the middle of March to the beginning of August, how much can he recover from that? Again, like you said, it's a pretty aggressive recovery timeline from a pretty aggressive surgery.
And again, like, this is not something where we're trying to overly project somebody for. Gadsden in his sophomore season produced 61 catches for over 950 yards and 6 touchdowns. He was averaging 15 yards per reception. Like, this is a guy whose dad was a regular NFL player for several years. This is a guy who should, like, for all intents and purposes, should not be at Syracuse. Like, I give Dino Babers a lot of credit here. The fact that he was able to pitch the Gadsden family on coming to Syracuse over the likes of some of the other schools that he was being recruited at is relatively impressive for Dino. And I think that Fran Brown is not inheriting a wasteland of a roster. He's inheriting some talent. The problem that Dino had was that he never had a quarterback who actually knew how to throw the ball outside of Eric Dungy his senior year. We're talking about Aronde put 950 yards receiving with a quarterback who wanted to be a running back. So I will give Aronde a ton of space to grow with Kyle McCord, who will be looking for that safety net over the middle, which is the definition of what Aronde Gadsden should be able to bring. Now, I think this segues really nicely into our next topic, which is Kyle McCord's comments at the ACC Media Day. But before we get there, let's talk about our sponsor, Home Field Apparel. Home Field Apparel. They make some really comfy college clothing, whether it's t-shirts, whether it's bomber jackets, whether it's joggers. You know the basics, but you know what they also do? They also do hats. I am wearing one right now. I'm going to hold it up to the screen. This is the Syracuse Cuse dad hat. I've got it styled with like the rim, and I can show you the inside. I wear the absolute ever crap out of this hat, and it still looks great. It still folds in. Home Field Apparel is one of the few apparel companies out there that cares about the quality of what they're sending you. And if you use promo code NEWS23, NUNES23, you get 10% off your first order at Home Field Apparel, whether it's dad hats, whether it's t-shirts, whether it's bomber jackets. We love them. They're a great company. They're doing quality stuff. And most importantly, they have Syracuse gear. And I'm really hoping that as the NIL game with Home Field Apparel grows, we'll see more college athletes wearing them, because you've got one Kyle McCord who is currently on the Syracuse roster, who is getting a ton of FaceTime, getting a ton of media attention because he is the quarterback of a Division I football program. But Christian, you and I haven't talked about Kyle McCord as a Syracuse quarterback yet.
No.
I am pretty low on Kyle McCord. I don't think he's that great of a quarterback. I think that we are relying on him to be a savvy veteran of the Syracuse roster. That being said, he made some comments at ACC Media Day around the idea of Syracuse being pretty similar to what they're trying to implement as to what Ohio State had already implemented. I don't know. Do you have any strong feelings about this before fall camp opens? or are you already like passing judgment on Mr. McCord?
Well, here's the thing. I think, unfortunately, and I think it was one of the stats that was brought up a lot when McCord was in the portal, when he eventually committed to Syracuse. It kind of goes back to just one of the same old trends that unfortunately we have to bring up all the time with Syracuse football. I'll go back to the college football game for this, and it is the offensive line. Um, what can Kyle McCord do with an offensive line that is unfortunately right now not seen as very spectacular? The numbers that are always brought up with Kyle McCord is that his numbers drastically drop when the pocket is pressured and the pocket collapses and he has to escape and improvise after that. And when you've got an offensive line right now who doesn't seem to have a great right guard option, you can see Joe Breeze right there is the highest right guard at a 74 rated. John Ray Reed is the highest center at a 77. Your highest guy is the left guard, Jacob Bradford, at an 80. And then you also have Enrique Cruz at a 79, along with the right tackles of David Wallabaugh and Demetrius Weatherspoon at 78 overall. It's not a offensive line that really fills you with a lot of hope, unfortunately. So what
That's my like you're nailing my concern right here. McCord's biggest strength is that he can get the ball out of his hand very quickly. We saw again, I don't really like to steal from other podcasts, but I'm about to. But the Split Zone Duo did a podcast about Ryan Day's offensive philosophy and evolution. And I was listening to it and hoping to understand, like, okay, what is Kyle McCord talking about? The thing with Ohio State's offense is that Ryan Day is probably one of the best passing game coordinators in football right now, pros or college. His problem has been within the running game. He's been relying on a lot of horizontal running games. And the idea is that the horizontal run game stretches the field and helps create more space for the passing game. LeQuint Allen is not a horizontal runner. LeQuint Allen is a north-south runner who wants to go between the tackles and run you over. I personally think that what McCord is going to be talking about is more that at Ohio State, he had one Marvin Harrison Jr., who was the safety valve within 5 to 10 yards. Like, hey, get it to this guy. If no one else is open, this guy will make something happen after the catch. But if this guy is not open, it means that the defense has spent extra resources to cover him so you can find someone else. And I feel like that is the same philosophy that's going to be used with Syracuse and Oronde Gadsden, where because of how the offensive line is, we are going to be looking at quick throws, lots of 3.5 seconds or less in the pocket for McCord, especially out of the shotgun, where Oronde is going to be the primary read in the slot. And if Oronde is not the primary read, let's open it up for someone else. And they should be relatively uncovered because if you doubled Oronde, you have one of the other bodies open somewhere in the field, including another tight end in Dan Villari, who, while I might not think the highest of, does provide a bit of a matchup problem. And so you start looking at ways that you can disguise your sets, like come out with a 2 tight end, 2 wide receiver set. Maybe a team comes out in a heavy base and you're able to spread the field a little bit more with that. You've got some options. But really, this offense is going to run through the Kyle McCord Oronde Gadsden connection. And if that is not working, yeah, you're pulling up the thing that I thought you would.
Yeah.
Like this, the reason we're talking about this guy is that he is like tight ends in modern football are a cheat code right now. And Syracuse has one, which is insane to say. Like, I don't know how else to put this.
It's awesome to see. obviously, that Aronde is seen this highly rated. For those who aren't watching or are listening on a podcast right now, I've got Aronde's player card pulled up. When you look at him in Dynasty on EA College Football 25, it's it's a great. Tim's pointed this out. This is a great way to just kind of showcase and support our points. We haven't had this visual aid in quite some time, other than the stats. Now we've got quote unquote third party EA benevolent EA raters to tell us what they think about Syracuse players right now, and this is and you saw it with the depth chart that I showed earlier with the ratings that the receivers have or are perceived to have had for the Syracuse team. Gadsden is McCord's best option by far and away, and so there's going to be times where it's going to have to be the effort around a down there somewhere throw from McCord. And that's going to be a lot of what the offense might end up being this year, especially if the other receivers can't step up and support McCord, like kind of what we've asked some of the other receivers, what we've asked other Syracuse receivers to do in the past as well. Even go back to when Dino was coaching with Syracuse. You always saw that there was just one receiver who had far and away better numbers than any other receiver that was on the roster. So it's kind of tough right now to see, since it makes Syracuse, as we've talked about in previous years with Syracuse, it makes Syracuse predictable, which can be a problem. Now, how Syracuse works around that, and how the Syracuse coaching staff works around that will be very, very interesting to see. And that could be the difference between, a lackluster season and the season that I think a lot of fans are expecting.
Yeah, I think so. So, like, turning to media day, McCord, Justin Barron, and oh man, I'm already forgetting the representatives.
It was LaQuint Allen and Fadil Diggs were also there as well.
Yes, there we go. I think there's definitely a lot of interesting things that are happening here. The conversations, that it's media day. There's not a whole lot of serious stuff being said. There's you get some interesting nuggets here. But I think one of the ones that is important is that when you're talking about who Syracuse chose to bring, we knew Justin Barron was going to be important. He's somebody that's involved in a lot of the off-the-field leadership things that Syracuse has. But Diggs coming over, say, a Marlowe Wax, Diggs is probably one of the biggest Syracuse acquisitions that they've ever had. And he is playing a pivotal position on the line in the trenches, edge rusher type body that they have sorely lacked. I am intrigued to see, as we move forward here, what the Syracuse defense looks like in terms of complementing the offense, if only because this is a league and a conference where defense is kind of optional. Like, without putting too generalized of a note on it, the offenses are all very good and the defenses are all very average. And I think LaQuint and Aronde are a really powerful combo to have. But on our side of the ball, like, how can we limit other teams from doing things? And I think that this is where it gets interesting. I know what you're about to do, so I'm going to let you kind of take the reins here.
It's definitely going to be interesting. I think that's a perfect time to bring up this defensive depth chart now from EA College Football. And it's interesting to see that Fadil is actually this lowly rated on EA College Football, just considering the impact that we think he can have, and I think a lot of people think that he can have. What I will let out as well is that something that you'll see on News Magician either tomorrow or in the next couple of days is that myself alongside Don Chapone simulated we each simulated 10 seasons of the 2024 season. And when we looked at the All ACC awards, consistently, at least in my simulations, Marlo Wax was always a first team All ACC player. Justin Barron was consistently an All ACC second team player alongside Deuce Chestnut, which is very, very interesting to see. Uh, but like, honestly, you say defense is optional. The thing is with Syracuse, so many of their heavy hitters are on the defensive side. When you look at Wax, when you look at Deuce, when you look at Justin Barron and Elijah Clark. I mean, even some of the linebackers aren't necessarily the biggest hitters, but they are, I think, a lot better than what their ratings suggest. I mean, when you got Diggs there at the 81 corner, you've got a Bellamy who's supposed to have a good breakout year alongside Devin Grant, who was an all MAC first team player last year with Buffalo. So this is going to be another one of those years where I think the defense is going to have the reign supreme for Syracuse. And you've got an aggressive defense that's ready to come along with some really, really talented players.
Yeah, I think this is going to be I think I got the Bill Steele book a while ago. I just read it and completed it. It's pretty obvious that people are looking at the Syracuse roster and essentially saying, like, look, this is a dramatic improvement over what Syracuse has had in the past. Like, there is no way around the fact that this team has improved. It's just a matter of, has the team dramatically improved over what was essentially a 500 roster, or has the team improved enough where 6-6 isn't a question mark, it's the floor? And again, we'll probably dive into this more as we get a better idea of camp, as we get a better idea of which players are getting runtime. But I'm cautiously optimistic that Syracuse is in a good position to potentially have a higher floor. I'm not necessarily sure the ceiling is all that much higher, but I think the floor is definitively higher than it's ever been, if only because of the talent on defense and the pure break away everything that exists on offense.
And again, like I said, Dom and I simulated 20 seasons of the 2024 season with Syracuse. And there were a couple outlier seasons, mainly from Dom's side, funnily enough, where you had a couple of 6-win seasons, a 7-win season, and a 5-win season. I had one outlier, really bad outlier of a 4-win season. I call that my Scott Schaefer season because, boy, that was an ugly, ugly season. And then 1-7 season. But a lot of our simulations, at least on my side, were 8-win, 9-win, and a couple 10-win seasons. But they were mainly 8-win seasons. And I think that is indicative of not only where the expectation is for Syracuse, but I think about where the average of where Syracuse is. And then you can set that floor at 6-10. That's the floor and ceiling mark at 6-10. I think that's actually pretty accurate to where you want to be with Syracuse wise. And I think that, again, we had a couple outlier seasons with 5-win and 4-win seasons. But I think those are outliers for a reason. And I firmly believe that it's been a while since we can think of 6 wins as a floor for this Syracuse program, which is indicatively just a very, very good sign.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that is overall, as we talk about the Syracuse football season, I think that there are a lot of people that are playing the game, taking Syracuse to a national championship, and are thinking that like playoff is a expectation that can be reached for this team. I think that like our final thought of the night should be like this really honest discussion that is, look, we are about to open the Pandora's box that is the 2024 college football season. I'm going to tell you right now, Syracuse will never be as good as it is right now.
Yeah.
Like the expectations, the things that you are playing on the video game right now, Syracuse will not be better than it is at this moment. As the season goes on, injuries will happen, the lack of depth will show. Fran is still a young new coach and young new coaches do not have a good track record in Division I Power 5 college football right now. What I can say is this. The floor is higher than it has ever been because, Christian, like you said, the foundations for 6 wins have never been more apparent. We are usually grasping at straws to figure out a way to get to 6 or 7 wins. And to be fair, Dino, even with his everything that happened in that last season, got to 6 wins. The floor has been elevated from the Greg Robinson era, which is something that a lot of people did not think would ever happen. Fran's task is the impossible task of how do you take a 6-win floor and do something else with it. And he's not going to prove in year 1 that it can be done. We are going to see elements of a foundation in year 1 that can be taken into year 2, year 3, year 4. And I think that is the hardest thing to remember about this right now. But it's also for me, as a college football fan who likes to play Dynasty mode on his NCAA football game, this is the most exciting part because what are those foundations? Is it recruiting? Is it schematic? Is it program culture? I don't know. We're not going to find out until maybe this new ACC documentary that we're getting.
Oh, I'm so excited. And it feels like at least 2 of those he's building very, very well with. The recruiting and the program tradition. Just as a little bit of an aside, I just did something really, really fun with Andy right here while we were all just sitting here. And I went ahead and did another sim of a season with Syracuse. And just to see where our floor and ceiling is. And Syracuse, what do you know? 8-5 record.
I would love 8-5. Let's walk. Okay, let's walk.
Well,
let's
this is the one outlier. This is now my 11th season that I've simmed with Syracuse, and I am 2-9 against Boston College.
Andre, honestly, Castellanos. The thing about this game is that when this game happens, BC is either going to be good or they're going to be bad, and depending on what your analytics are, you lean very one way, and it all comes down to Castellanos.
But as you can see, there's a lot of variety in this schedule because it included, yes, the wins against NC State and Miami, the big hitters, but then this 3-game losing streak against Virginia Tech, Boston College, and California.
Yeah. I mean, that is not, I mean, October is a hell of a stretch for Syracuse football. No home games. You get the bye week in there, but you have to go to NC State and to Pittsburgh, who have owned Syracuse away from the JMA Dome. I will probably be going to that UNLV game, so, please don't lose that game, Syracuse. That's all I ask. Anyways, this is kind of ridiculous. I do not want to lose to Boston College again, but Castellanos is a bit of a wild card, to say the least.
And as a little bit of fun, as you can see, Syracuse wins over Utah in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. So Syracuse is having Pop-Tarts.
I would love to go to the Pop-Tarts Bowl so badly.
Just to end this off, I always love in these sims just to look at the CFP bracket because I've had some wild results. This one is one of the more tame ones. with Ohio State winning it all. But this is
Ohio State over Clemson. Oh my God! Please shoot me now.
This is one of the more tame results that I've had, including, as you can see, Nevada sneaking as the Group of 5 team.
Honestly, I don't hate that. Do not hate this sim at all. NC State and Clemson being the ACC reps, like that's kind of what Bill C's numbers say. Florida, that I have questions with. But Ole Miss, Penn State, Georgia, Nevada, don't hate that. Do not hate that. Christian, we kind of have to end it early here. I have a hard out at 9. This has been fun to catch up with you. And you know what the crazy part is? We have been doing this now for 3-ish years. So this is going to be our third. No, this is going to be our 4th college football season doing this, 3rd with you.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're talking about really bad college football.
Holy moly, does it ever. I came in as the guy teaching lacrosse to you guys.
It's the things that Syracuse does to you, the networks that it creates. Maybe we do a live show this September when I get up there.
I really hope we do. That'd be so much fun.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. But I think this is where we can call it early for this edition of the Disloyal Idiots podcast. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Trick that AI into expanding the Ottoman Empire. It's the only way that we can make sure that we can continue to grow the show with our friends at the Fans First Sports Network, who are, of course, covering all of your college sports needs across all your teams and across college football as a whole. Thank you to our friends at newsmagician.com. Again, Steve and Christian write over there pretty frequently. Make sure that you go over and like the website. If you're watching us on News Magician, thank you for your continued support. We do really appreciate that continued loyalty expanding from over there. If you're watching us on Twitch, thank you. We do this every Sunday night around 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll continue to do this throughout the entire football season. And if you are watching us on any of the Fans First Sports Networks platforms, like our friend Tim Lyons, thank you for supporting us as we continue this, what will be our 2nd full season under our new podcast banner. We really appreciate it. We're going to continue to grow the show. If you know Syracuse fans, like, share all these videos. It helps us expand the show reach. And as always, thank you, Home Field Apparel, our longest and only sponsor of the show. Promo code NUNES23, NUNES23 for 10% off your first order. Christian, I have to go play trivia, and then I'm going to start my 2028 campaign as the defending national title winners. I hope that you're enjoying EA college football as much as I am.
I'm ready for the 2032 college football playoffs with Syracuse that I will do after I finish my news articles for tonight.
As always, go Orange.
Go Orange.